Uncle George, written by and starring Chris Zivright. The flute is played by Angharad Anderson Bloomfield. I've not been very well lately. In fact, I've not been very well at all. A few months ago it seemed to me to be time to gather my thoughts, prepare for the next big adventure. The Financial Times, or at least when I have enough energy to read it, is always going on about the necessity of planning for the future. My next adventure is a visit to heaven, hell, or nothingness. It was a time to look back, to remember fond occurrences, my first relationship, my first marriage. I've had several, you know. My extended family, my first job, my school, my holidays. A time to relive those times before they grow too distant, or as I floated away into the ether, I was distanced from them. I remember when I was young, I used to have an uncle, Uncle Eric. Always smelt of pipe tobacco. He had a bald head and a ginger moustache. He used to come to Bournemouth, where my mother and I lived. He was a good chap, a decent cove, a proper gentleman, someone to be treasured, rather like a fossil. I hope my nieces and nephews see me like that. Anyway, because I was ill, the doctor diagnosed it and the second doctor agreed, I decided to call a meeting whilst I was still able to speak, still able to collect my thoughts, still compos mentis. So I contacted my nephew and nieces. I have several, but not all could make the journey. I called them to Oxford. "Come to Oxford," I wrote. "I have something to ask you." They said I should phone. I said it was too detailed, and anyway, it was too personal. One of them said I should email. I said I wanted to ask a question, not engage in lengthy correspondence, and I never know when it's going to be read and or replied to, and even if I did, it would go to spam, or my email would go to spam, and then where would we be? With me having asked and not knowing if they were going to answer, or choosing not to even if they had, and all this is supposed to take place in just a few minutes. As we all know, email is so much faster, if you see what I mean. So they came to Oxford. One nephew came, the others live in other countries, and my nieces, my favourite nieces. Well, actually, I only have two, so they're both my favourite, but I call each one of them one of my two favourite nieces. It's an old comment, an old joke, but it still makes me smile. They came to see me in my small flat, where I've lived for 10 years since Madge, my wife, passed away. The local Meals on Wheels service has stopped, so I asked them to bring some food. Not that I haven't got any, but it's nice if young ones bring something. Make it seem a bit like Christmas. They arrived on Sunday, a bad day for trains, but a good day for coming by car. As they all live near each other, only one car was needed. They arrived at 2. "What's all this about, Uncle George?" said one. "You sounded very sombre on the phone." I explained I had something to ask them, and would they all take a seat. They insisted on pleasantries first, and we drank tea and talked about the football, gypsies, unemployment, the Olympics, and the weather. Actually, we talked mostly about the Olympics, the security problems, the empty seats, staff shortages, and the like. I remember one of my nieces became quite agitated when the topic of corporate sponsorship came up. Then I told them it was time for me to ask my question. I've been to see several doctors, and the sad thing is that they've all told me I am dying, and dying quite soon, I said. I wanted to make a joke about this, as we're all dying anyway, all that Keynes said in the long run, etc. The last bit was because my nephew is doing some degree or other, and has been very chirpy that he got a grade 3 pass recently. It would have been a comment he would appreciate, being all intellectual and that. But I didn't mention Keynes. This is my question, I said. If I wanted you to have the opportunity to drastically change your life for the better, how much money would it take, and what would you do with it? I haven't got unlimited funds, so let's imagine I have enough for £30,000 maximum each. Maybe I shouldn't have used the word drastically. After all, drastically might mean just a few thousands to one, or $500,000 to the other. But drastically it was. My nephew was the first to reply. "That's a real toughie, Uncle George," he said. "Not enough to give up work or pay off the mortgage." He was always the practical one, doing spreadsheets, being realistic. But he'd always be the first one to buy me a beer when I used to stagger down the pub and then stagger home many hours later. I think I would buy a small woodland or a few fields and spend as much time as possible in them, exploring them with the kids, and my own campsite with my own rules like no campfires allowed. I felt I should make some notes: woodland, kids, and a place where he sets the rules. Maybe £30,000 would buy that in Wales, but certainly nowhere near Oxford. The nearest is probably Clifton Heath Wood, located between Clifton Hampton and Nuneham Courtenay, to the south of Oxford and east of Abingdon in Oxfordshire. The woodlands are accessed directly off the B4015, currently on the market for £6 million, a snip. But how much would it take, I asked. About 125k, Unc, he said. I would pay off the mortgage, resign from work and evaluate options in the changing environment, possibly relocate to the south coast, as we're mainly in Chippenham, for a job. Evaluate options, he'd said. How come when you actually do have money, i.e. when you're older, the fewer the options you really seem to have? You appear to have time, i.e. every day, but in reality you're running out of time. The conveyor belt nears the conclusion. I turned to my first niece, but she said nothing. Then my second niece spoke up. £10,000 would be enough, Unc, she said. That would change my life. I could get a driving licence and a van to start a gardening business. That's all I'd need. I don't need to take a trip to see a long-lost relative, birth parent, someone who bullied me at boarding school. Neither do I need plastic surgery. I don't go and meet idiots on the net. With that, she cackled a lot. I'm pretty sure she farted too. She does tend to do that. She says that if you fart in front of someone, then it's a sign you're relaxed. Personally, I've always thought that's a bit of your body you should never relax. She then went on to say, I do know someone with a tattoo on his head, and they want money to get it removed. I see him every day as he hangs around my flat. It'd be nice not to have to see his advertisement." "Thank you for that," I said, still hoping the other niece would speak up, but she said nothing. With that, I said it was probably time for them to go, as they had a long drive back to Mendip, which is where they live, and they gathered their things together. At the doorway, just as they were leaving, one of them turned round and looked me in the eye. It was a look of mixed emotions, sadness, fear, maybe even anger, but all disguised by the smile, one of happiness. "What we'd really all want, Uncle George, is not to have this money, but for you to spend it on yourself, to get well and be the uncle we've always loved and laughed with, hugged and shared our sorrows. The uncle who's always been there for all of us." And with that, they went on their way. Funny thing, love, must be something about it that makes the world go round. A few days later, I saw the article in the Financial Times. It was a complaining article about some special treatment that was definitely not available on the NHS. But you could have it done privately, though it cost a bit. In fact, it costs a lot, to include follow-on treatment, about £90,000. The same amount of money I had discussed with my nephew and favourite nieces. They had concluded that what they really wanted was for their unc to be fit and well and healthy. And I like to give them what they want. So I've spent all my money, and I now have nothing left, but I'm as fit as a fiddle and off to visit my family. Maybe they'll even let me move in. It's a good time for them to have Uncle George around. I can imagine the pleasure on their faces even now.